Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. You've reached the No Name Cinema Society, the film review show that dares to dig just a little bit deeper. And this is our classic movie discussion, episode 72.3. And tonight we're going to dig in deeper on one of our films from our 1947 in review, Michael Powell's Black Narcissus. Hi, everybody. My name is Jonathan Betzler. I'm one of your hosts here at my home in Los Angeles. And yes, this is our first classic of this new season. It's been, late getting started. It's been quite a year as we've been talking about. But it has become a tradition on our show for the first classic of the season to look at an individual film from the year we just finished studying. In 2018, we had just finished studying 1942, so our first classic of that year was Mrs. Miniver in episode 47.3. In 2019, our first classic was The Last Temptation of Christ in episode 54.3, after just having studied 1988. In 2020, episode 60.3, we studied North by Northwest after just having done 1959 in review. In 2021, we discussed the very controversial El Topo after doing 1970. And just last year, in episode 70.3, we discussed the film Howard the Duck after studying 1986, the year before. Tonight, we'll be digging deeper on one of the films from our 1947 in review, like we talked about, Black Narcissus, from the filmmaking team of Michael Powell and Emmerich Pressburger. And to discuss this film with me, ladies and gentlemen, first, the veteran of the show, the English-speaking, often drunk, but devilishly handsome liaison of the No Name Cinema Society, Patrick Taylor is here.
That's me doing sign language applause for everyone listening.
Yes, we've seen Coda, so we know what that is. And also with us, ladies and gentlemen, an uptight nun who joined the society under highly controversial circumstances, Melanie Richeau is here.
Hello, everyone.
All right, so that's Patrick and Mel with us, ladies and gentlemen. This is the triumvirate for this discussion of Black Narcissus. And so here is our schedule for this, which has been our 72nd series of episodes. It started last Thursday with a review of our current feature, continued this past Monday with our indie spotlight, Minding the Gap from 2018. Tonight, of course, is the classic movie discussion. And this upcoming Monday will be our 56th sound off. Patrick's going to do a below the line segment. We're going to do our tweet peek going over the finales of the past year. And Devin and I will be counting down our top 5 films from 1947 based on tonight's discussion of Black Narcissus. That was our schedule for this, our 72nd series of episodes. Can't believe it's that many. So now the big question is, who's drinking with me, guys? Anybody?
Oh, yeah.
What is that?
This is a baby bottle,
Patrick, I think you've done shows since you've been a dad. I know we've congratulated you on the pregnancy, but Patrick's now a dad. He's got a baby bottle. I don't think your baby would like this. I've got a clear glass here, but I want to bring out the whole bottle to prove that I will be drinking wine. It's just Woodbridge. Devin didn't want it. He left it here during the last CMS screening of The Goodbye Girl, which means that'll be a classic movie discussion in the next couple of years. But so I'll be drinking wine. Mel, I assume you're going to be a loser and not drink anything?
Tea.
Ooh.
See, you could say that there's anything in that glass, and I would in that mug. That's my girl. So here's the drinking slide. These are things that you drink to when we do them on the show, submitted by you guys, the fans. Anytime I say all-time contrivance, verisimilitude, diegesis, or anytime Patrick doesn't know the name of an actor or a director is when you guys drink. Mel's still new to the show, so she doesn't have one yet. We'll get one eventually. But cheers to the audience for joining us for this episode.
Here.
Cheers. Oof. Cheers to Patrick's baby. How old's the baby now?
The baby is 1 year, 1 month.
1 year, 1 month. That's there you go. All right, so I'm going to start with the summary. You guys ready?
Yes.
Difficult film to summarize. Black Narcissus. A British working order of Catholic nuns are ordered to set up a new convent in a remote area of Darjeeling, high upon a mountaintop, to help educate the more primitive local villagers there, as well as treat them for their illnesses with Western medicine. However, the nuns are ill-prepared for the culture, the tradition, the atmosphere, and the emotion attached to their new environment. I always start the classics with screening notes, because all the classics that we review in the show were initially screened at screenings I've hosted one place or another, New York, Los Angeles, Milwaukee, Chicago now. We attended a screening of this film at TCM Fest back in 2017, at Film Forum in 2019, and of course, we watched it for a 1947 review last year. Now, in all our years in review, when we go over the Oscar categories, and Patrick has done this for 1959, the 1959 review, we always tell you who should have won and who should have been nominated. And we often have agreement on what should have won because that's narrowed down for us. You know, the chances of us agreeing on one of 5 nominees is pretty high. But we had never had an agreement on what should have been nominated. Here's what happened on the 1947 in review last year. Devin, what was your #1 film of 1947 that should have been nominated for Best Picture?
No big surprise, Black Narcissus. It's just posing some fascinating questions about the duality of the universe and about all of existence and all of these crazy, disparate thoughts and emotions that get brought up in this remarkable film.
Knowing me as well as you do, how do you think I'm going to respond to this?
I know you like the film a lot. You might be in agreement that this should have won.
Not only is this the best film of 1947 for me, but it is also my 9th favorite film of all time, Black Narcissus, which I had the very pleasure of introducing Devin to at a screening at TCM Fest in 2017. Not only is it ridiculously cinematic and gorgeous, it's also extremely meaningful. To me, it's about spirituality. And again, not really in a monotheistic way, just in general. It's also about vocation and cultural divides. But perhaps most of all, to me, it's about the possible illusion of control as these women struggle with their inner desires that they had suppressed for so long. I've mentioned this film many times on the show over the years and hope even more people will give it a try and experience the intelligent artfulness of this extraordinary masterpiece. And that's not a word I use lightly. Again, my 9th favorite film of all time, and I've seen quite a few. And so, Jim, I understand you like Black Narcissus. I suspect that it's not going to be a clean sweep. If it were, it would be our first ever clean sweep and it should have been nominated category. I don't think you're going there.
Black Narcissus was one of my favorite movies from 1947. It is also the movie that I said should be nominated for Best Motion Picture.
First time ever! And it's a Best Picture! First time ever! We have agreement on what should have been nominated for Best Picture. First time ever, we have a clean sweep in the should have been nominated category. 8 years we've been doing this. Society history there is all 3 of us at the panel had the same film as the best film of 1947. It's the film we're talking about tonight. And as I said, it's my 9th favorite film of all time. So before we do this is where we do their opening thoughts. But I just want to see, had anybody seen this film before or even heard of it before having to watch it for tonight?
No, I had not.
Not even heard of it. All right, let's see who's first for opening thoughts. It looks like Patrick, 1 sentence or less. How'd you feel about Black Narcissus?
I thought it was an ambitious film with great sets. Culturally inappropriate to the right now, but still fine. A lot of the common themes that you'd see today, people struggling with their identity.
And Mel.
I get the hype. Didn't age amazingly.
I didn't see it in 1947. You realize that, right?
It's my opinion.
They're decidedly less enthusiastic than Jim, Devin, and I. I'm going to start with the things that I think are strongest about it, and so we're going to start with direction. The immediate and obvious takeaway from Black Narcissus is the look of it. I've said that it was the most gorgeous color cinematography ever photographed. The Oscar-winning production design that Patrick mentioned a little bit is also extraordinary, especially if you realize it was the entire thing, exteriors, interiors, was all built on sound stages. Even though DP Jack Cardiff and production designer Alfred Young were responsible for those departments respectively, it was all in the service of the vision of director Michael Powell. But not just the look of the shots, the choices of the shots themselves. That breathtaking overhead at high angle when they ring the bell. It looks amazing, but it's also foreshadowing. A consistent use of foreground, background, subtle camera movement. This shattering moment when during a flashback version of Clodagh, she says, "I don't want things to ever change." And then a slow, perfectly matched dissolve into her present day self that happens to be a nun. These are examples of filmmaking at its finest, using the form to communicate ideas. All of this adds up to a thorough use of mise-en-scène. Note, for example, the shape of the mirrors in the Blue Room, a room whose history of sexuality oozes its way into the hearts and minds of the current residents. The paintings that adorn the walls, the shifts of color scheme from scene to scene and room to room, all part of a perfectly orchestrated scheme furthering these thematic ideas. The film's boldest choices, perhaps, are related to the tone. It seamlessly shifts from a thoughtful, esoteric drama to almost an erotic thriller. Its third act goes all out and pulls no punches in a way that could have been a train wreck, but to me it works. It's motivated because it's driven by the mental state of one of the characters, and so the back and forth in tone matches with whichever character they're spending time with at the moment. In public screenings, some of these moments elicit cheers, excitement, and applause. It was a big swing, but to me and to many others, it was a home run. Mel, what do you got?
I agree with everything you said. I thought it was very well directed. The visuals were like really stunning, evocative. Is that the right word?
If it evokes a feeling, it's evocative.
It did like get under my skin in a way. Both the visuals and, like you said, that swing in tone, almost genre really, which took me by surprise. And I think is part of why I'm like, I think that this film was excellently done. It would never be on a favorites list of mine because it got sort of creepy and I wasn't expecting it. I agree. It was like well done because it matched, like you said, the emotional like journey and this slow spiral into like insanity and just turmoil for these nuns. I think it was successfully done. It got under my skin. I was just thinking when to bring up like how I felt like it didn't age well with the cultural stuff.
Well, is it just about the casting? Is that the, because I teach this film now. I actually bring it into classes, and the classes hate the film for that reason. I don't know if it's fair, but to your point, to each their own, I guess. But
seeing brown face is just jarring today as a person of color. It's like another layer to get past in order to get to the heart of the film, which I still feel that I was able to, and I want to be able, to discuss this film aside from that. But it is sort of a directorial thing and like just it's a thing.
Perhaps more enhanced in the sense that there was a mix. There was actually, appropriate people appropriately cast. Patrick, before we dig in on the cultural issues, anything else about the direction?
I think the we have to talk about the director and as the leader of all the departments. And I think the department that I felt like fell the most was the lead actor's wardrobe or lack thereof. He had no shirt on for half the time and like wearing weird Peter Pan clothing. It was just strange and distracting. I thought that his direction of the actors and the tension between them was always interesting. So, but that would be where the film fell short for me.
And it did not win an Oscar for its wardrobe. It won an Oscar for cinematography, it won an Oscar for production design. But to your point, it did not win an Oscar for wardrobe. I have to say, in defense of Michael Powell, I do feel like the wardrobe choices fit Mr. Dean. He's so apathetic, given up on so many ways that he doesn't seem to care about what he wears and how he wears it. There's almost like a lack of choice from a character point of view, as if the character is just grabbing the first thing on the rack, probably not even clean, because who cares? He has native women that he can seduce anytime he wants. So he doesn't care what he wears. There's no one around. He's sort of like, given into this world. So it sort of matched that for me. I definitely did not anticipate going in this direction. Mel, anything on the wardrobe?
No, but he was my least favorite character. He sort of bumped me a bit just as a character. It wasn't like wardrobe in my mind at the time.
Okay, so, let's dig in a little bit on this cultural thing, as my students always bring it up as well when I show this film, and it's the first thing they want to talk about, which is, and then I've taught it twice now, and then there would be students that would stay after class. Can I just tell you one more thing about this film? They were afraid to tell me how much they loved the film. They had to wait till everyone left because of all the anger, quite literally, the fact that I showed this film. I would understand if there weren't a ton of other films of the time doing the same thing. I understand not aging well to some degree, and maybe there's something about the fact that it's in color versus black and white magnified it. This is a common practice that doesn't make it okay, certainly from today's point of view. And we talked about this, a lot on our episode when we did a review of the Jolson story. Patrick and I talked about it a little bit because he was on the sound off immediately after that review. The Jolson story is a biopic about Al Jolson. Do you know who Al Jolson is, Mel?
Mm-mm.
The biggest artist of the 20s by far. In fact, he was in the very first sound film, The Jazz Singer, in 1927.
Oh, okay, yeah, I know what you're talking about then. Yeah.
And Al Jolson was a minstrel. The real person, Al Jolson, did blackface, and therefore the actor playing Al Jolson did blackface to play Al Jolson doing blackface. You know what I mean? So it had these other layers going on. And that movie was 1946. This movie is 1947. And Devin and Jim can tell you, having watched 40 plus films from 1947, that blackface, in addition to brownface, was actually popped up in a number of films. So, like, I don't know if you just become desensitized to it or what, but it's not like they were doing something that was unusual. Again, doesn't make it right. You talk about directing choices. Could they have searched long and hard to find culturally appropriate actors? Sabu was already a star. I mean, I don't know all that went into the choices of. There was mainly 2 inappropriate ones that stand out into my mind. You tell me if there was more.
Mhm.
But also, Gene Simmons is one of my favorite actors of all time, so it's hard to kick her out of this movie. But Patrick, I haven't let you chime in about this.
It was an inappropriate time, and I think we should talk about it. But it was of its time. What was interesting though about this movie was that it wasn't the classic colonizer story. It was of the request of the general, who was of the people, bringing in the monastery to give education.
The old King and I concept, and a leader wants to modernize his people. The leader wants to be a part of the futuristic world, and so he drags his constituents kicking and screaming into the futuristic world because of his own selfish wants and needs, to be recognized. But the thing you got to realize, India in particular was already colonized. You know what I mean? So this is an area this general is in charge of. He's trying to negotiate with the people that have already colonized him. He's not resisting colonization.
It just felt like the way they were framing the nuns coming to the area was just a little bit of a different.
100%. You're not wrong. I'm just sort of adding a little bit of detail. Mel, we may have gone on a sidetrack there a little bit, but do you have any comments on anything Patrick and I said about either thing?
No, I think, as you guys said, those lines felt true, accurate to the characters and the time and everything.
We hear racist lines in movies today, spoken by people that are being portrayed as racist intentionally.
Yeah, I think part of it is the feeling when something is from that time. Like when something today, you feel like there's a self-awareness, whereas in a movie like this, you're like, oh, I don't know if they were aware. And that's just like a weird feeling,
and it's sad. But also then you flash forward 50 years from now, and what is it now that we are unaware of that is good? You know what I mean? You don't know what you don't know.
And I think the same way though that we can now sit and sort of discuss this movie having grace for those things, that lack of awareness. We can also have grace for people of color trying to engage with this content and being like, that was sort of hard for me. Because it's just and I am eager to discuss just the craft of this film and look past that. But I can't not mention it because it definitely affected how I viewed this movie. So it's just another layer when you're watching a movie. Some people are able to totally look past it, and other people it's just carries some baggage or some stuff for them.
It's the first thing that comes out of the mouth of my students every time they mention it. Not about the gorgeous cinematography or the mise-en-scène or anything like that, because there's so much to talk about at this movie. But the only thing they want to talk about is the casting of 2 characters. That doesn't make it irrelevant, but it came out in your opening thoughts. It is a dark cloud that hangs over the film I call the masterpiece.
Yeah, it does feel like it hung over it for me, and I kept having to be it just affects the way, we watch things. Again, I felt like I had to bring it up because it felt like
absolutely. Yeah. And not, but I feel like we discussed it now. And just
to that point, just as a counter, I did feel like there was times that they definitely humanized the native Indian in a way, the men are just men, the women are just women, sometimes when you hear stories in Africa, it's just everyone's a savage, there's no, even the shaman or, kind of the wise man who was in the mountain, they showed how much the people loved him. He had power and he gave it away, and how this is part of his purpose, and we can't move him. There's even reverence for him, he can't be moved. So I think it wasn't as just flippant racism, it was just little bits of time in it didn't age well, but I do feel like there was some humanizing elements for the natives that you don't necessarily see in a lot of films.
Yeah, I agree. I really liked the prince character. He was an interesting
character. The thing about Sabu was a big star. He lived in Britain. It was not something they had to go find. In fact, if you look at the poster, he's actually got second billing, Sabu. even though he's definitely not got this second biggest role. Because he was in a movie of the 30s called The Thief of Baghdad, which was a huge hit, which of course is the Aladdin story. So he was Aladdin, and he was a huge star as a result, one name, memorable kind of person. That was an easy casting situation in that we can find someone that's culturally appropriate and is a star. Gene Simmons, for example, was an upcoming star, and the very next year she would be in Olivier's Hamlet. That same year she was Estella in David Lean's version of Great Expectations. She was definitely an up-and-comer. I imagine that it's something to do with the choice. She's one of my favorite actresses, but I wish they hadn't made the choice, because I wish we would be able to look at this movie, because it's so important to me. That's an interesting segue. It's time to talk about performances in the film. And a couple of performances did come up on the 1947 review, where I actually said that Deborah Kerr was not only the best actress of 1947, I also said it was the best performance of the 1940s. Deborah Kerr is Sister Clodagh. It's the extraordinary subtle way she lets the cracks of desire seep through the officious exterior, one she feels she needs to put on for respect to prove herself. I think it's a deliciously complex role that she absolutely knocks out of the park. Exquisite work, years ahead of its time. Jim said it was his second favorite performance of the year, and Devin didn't like it. So we'll see what these guys have to say. Patrick, I let Mel go first last time. Deborah Kerr is Sister Clodagh.
I thought she was great. I thought the flashbacks really let me into her motivation. I could understand some of the choices that she was making, of the stoic kind of, can't let anyone see me fall. But I thought she did a great job.
Awesome. Mel?
I agree. But I think Sister Ruth, her performance stuck out to me more.
Okay, you're all about transition, so fine. That's where I was going to go next. I wish we could just talk about things one at a time, but no one likes to answer the questions. They want to go on to what they want to talk about next. Kathleen Byron as Sister Ruth, which is potentially the most controversial aspect, at least on our 1947 review. Devin took exception when Jim named Kathleen Byron as the Best Supporting Actress of the year, and I actually had put her in second place. Jim referred to her as the funhouse mirror to Deborah Kerr's character of Sister Clodagh. It's big for a reason, to contrast the subtlety of Kerr and a warning of the depths that Clodagh could go to if she were to stay in Mopu anymore. It's an intense, balls-to-the-wall portrait of a woman unraveling, over the top in just the right way, to me exactly what it needed to be. And I say that having seen Kathleen Byron in other films. This performance is no accident. The script doesn't really call out the mental struggles. The actor does the heavy lifting here. Kathleen Byron is Sister Ruth. Devin was very much against that choice for Best Supporting Actress. Mel, you wanted to talk about Kathleen Byron, so you go first.
Oh, I thought she was great. I mean, she freaked me out, but I believed her. When I think about acting in that film, she stands out the most to me as what a performance. I thought it was really good.
All right, so I'm in agreement with you. Let's see if Patrick takes Devin's side.
I thought the best part of her performance was her ability to hold sweat on her forehead.
There's a lot of sweat on the forehead.
That's not altogether different from what Devin was saying.
Her cracked lips were that was
great. So I thought she was great. I thought when it cut to red, and her her maniacal phase was well done. It was a little over the top, but I believed her. I didn't believe her love for the gentleman as much as I believed her unwanting of her lifestyle. She just was not happy. And she's just using the guy as an excuse.
To Mel's point, it's the showier performance for sure. What I appreciate about Deborah Kerr's work as Sister Clodagh is the subtlety of it. But what I appreciate about Kathleen Byron, as I mentioned, is the balls to the wall, fearless aspect of it. Devin's point is not altogether different from yours, is that he felt the makeup was doing a lot of the work, and she needed to be more aware of her makeup, that she didn't need to add and some of the other things that the camera and other elements were doing. And I was like, well, I disagreed, obviously. So it's interesting that you brought up makeup, because Devin did as well in a different kind of way.
Good for Devin. I mean, she overacted a little bit, but I mean that could also be the script and could also be the direction. It wasn't. I mean,
having studied Michael Powell, I know she was too big. Michael Powell would have toned that down. I mean, and obviously the music totally backed up everything she was doing in concert with what the rest of the movie was doing, which is why it's clearly a choice. It clearly worked for me. Again, I said I've seen other performances, and I don't think it's overacting. It was exactly right for what this character was going through, the extreme mental struggles this character was going through. It seemed to work even for 1947. All right, so this performance has come up a little bit, or not necessarily the performance, but Patrick wanted to talk about it in terms of wardrobe. Mel wanted to talk about it in terms of script. But for me, the only real aspect of the film I don't love, I'm going to talk about it in terms of performance. I think David Farrar has always bothered me a little bit as Mr. Dean. Kind of a lazy performance. He doesn't really give any sense of life to Mr. Dean, or his wants, or his need, or his backstory. Mel's going to say, well, maybe that should be part of the script. No, I don't know if it needs to be. I think this actor needs to do some work there. He's not a main character, so I don't know if the script should have done that. Even if the character is a drifter, that quality comes from a place, and I don't feel like David Farrar made a ton of choices based on that. I do believe his connection to Clodagh. I bought that sexual tension between them, but that's just about it. So Mel, you wanted to talk about this in terms of screenplay. I think it's a performance issue.
No, I think I actually agree with you. Having thought about it, I think it's his performance that bothered me. Because when I think about his character, there's so much potential to be a character that I really like, actually. And he had some really great lines, even when he's like, Christ should be part of your everyday conversation or whatever. He sort of like speaks these truths of their faith to them. And I don't know, it's like, I feel like normally I'm very primed to like the drifter or the whatever, the apathetic.
Because that's so you.
Totally. No, but I kept feeling like, oh, I think they want me to really like this guy, but his performance is just like rubbing me the wrong way. It's almost like he felt like he was like the sexiest man alive, and he just wasn't doing it for me at all. If it wasn't so apparent that he thought he was so attractive, maybe I would have liked him more. I just think that character could be so much more interesting if played like way more understated and less like cocky and like, well, I don't know. So he rubbed me the wrong way.
And hearing you talk about it, I also think he represents, an older style of acting. Like Deborah Kerr would move to America shortly after this and would have a long career, many Oscar nominations. She never actually won. So yeah, she had a long career in the States after this. And David Farrar did not, because he was almost like that oldie, like almost theatrical kind of acting style that didn't seem to have a place in this particular film, although he did do many other Michael Powell films. Patrick, David Farrar is Mr. Dean.
I disagree.
First of all, is he good looking? Do you find him good looking?
Oh man, first off, the fact that he had all those scenes without a shirt on and I never saw his nipples once. This man is a treasure.
I'm glad I asked Patrick to be in the show. I now see this movie in a whole different way.
His shirt is always open to, no nipples. I do feel like it was the writing for his lack of motivation. I feel like in the beginning, and they're talking and they're like, oh, they won't last a minute. But you don't know why they don't want these people here. Or the problem.
I think that's inferable.
I don't get why he was.
Well, I think for him, it's something to do, like work.
Well, he could have said that, right? He could just be lazy. Like, it didn't seem like he was lazy. He was fixing the pipes. No one asked him to do that. He'd come.
Well, also, like if you remember, there had been a monastery there before that, and they didn't last. What was it, 3 months or something?
Right. If he had just said, "Oh, so much work,"
that might have been a little on the nose. But I get your point. Something else.
Something to understand what his problem is. Like why, like he didn't like the monks. He doesn't like the nuns.
I think it's more about the colonization aspect of it that I think he was, he would like rather just live there with his native friends and not feel British authority. Like I think it was more of like, oh, I know I'm British, but like they're going to send more Brits here and like we don't need them. Again, I'm inferring, but I think that's the beauty of the film. I want to make films that make you do work, that you have to like make some guesses or make some theories about.
Yeah, with him, I didn't understand some of his choices. Like he goes into the church and knocks over the stool for no reason, and he doesn't seem noticeably drunk, but then he's drunk at the end of the day. And
that's a great point. He's not a good drunk. He's a very bad drunk.
Great singer. There's a way you can sing like a drunk. He was actually a beautiful singer, and then he was wasted on the way out. It didn't. So maybe that's direction. Maybe that's acting. I'm not exactly sure.
It's time to talk about Mel's favorite section. And I don't have a lot because we've talked about this film a great deal. Screenplay-wise, I think it's really good. It's an adaptation of a book. I think it's a solid structure. I like to lean into the slow burn as this film did as well. I think it's taut. I feel like everything in the script is there for a reason and comes back. The room or the rain or her background, like in the flashback, like everything established comes back in some shape or form. And I think the dialogue is smart and motivated without being overly clever, which is something Devin Gem and I noticed in a 1947 review. A lot of scripts, like they wanted their dialogue to be sharp and clever and witty, but all the characters sounded clever and witty, and it didn't feel as real. This felt a little more honest and real to me. So I'll go to our resident writing teacher, Mel.
It's one of those movies where I didn't think about the screenplay like at all, which is a really good thing. The one thing I did feel, and this is a good thing, this isn't a critique either, as soon as we dipped into that different tone, I was like, I have no idea what's gonna happen. I'm pretty sure someone needs to fall off of this cliff. Pretty sure that's gonna happen, but I didn't know who. And I genuinely, when they're like struggling, you know, and she looks like she's gonna fall, I was like, oh, she's the one who goes off. And then it flips, and I was like, oh, and then I had that like inevitable but unexpected feeling. This is what needed to happen, but I didn't see it coming like in the way it did. I felt very like swept up in wind, like I don't know how this resolves, but I still felt satisfied. I guess I felt satisfied at the end. Now I'm like, the very end, it did feel a little abrupt, but what else can happen? I don't know. It was very like kind
Although I love that grace note at the end. They shake hands and they sort of look at each other and like almost hold hands for a second. And then as soon as they disappear, because they had this bet, again, talking about a screenplay, they had this bet that I give you till the rains come, and they're leaving, and then it starts to rain. That level of detail, I think, is just a really, really nice coda to me. But yeah, to your point, Mel, after the movie, you can go back and find the act points. But I don't think you see them. And that's the number thing when I'm teaching screenwriting is you want to have the acts, but you want to bury them. You want to hide them so that you don't feel like an audience being like, okay, this is the twist, or this is when you know what I mean? Like ideally, you know, you don't want them to feel that because you want them to be invested. I do think the screenplay achieves that very thing. Patrick.
Yeah, no, I thought it was I thought the words coming out of the actors' mouths were believable, and that's a credit to the actors and credit to the writers. Just like we were saying, you know, it's kind of unnoticeable. Like it kind of feels like it's a natural thing coming out of their mouths. So I thought a great screenplay.
And of course, as we said before, the screenwriter, part of the duo of the Archers, was Emmerich Pressburger, and he wrote a lot of the screenplays that Michael Powell would then direct. Patrick, you know what's coming up now? It is the T word! For our audio listening audience, he put his hands into a T formation. This is where we talk about the themes of the film. Our founding member, Davey, Drunk Davey, he didn't like to talk about themes. He thought it felt like homework. So we would dance around and call it the T word, and a segment was born. And my golly, is there a lot to talk about with this film. I will try and blow through it because there's one I want to focus on most. And I talked about some of these when we did our 1947 review. I think it's about spirituality, not religion per se, but spirituality. I think it's about vocation. The choice to commit your life to God is an extreme one. It's almost like a marriage, only more so, and potentially unnatural. Each of these women has their vows challenged in different ways, suggesting that this sort of lifelong commitment is almost akin to self-flagellation and therefore suppressive. I think to some degree it's about cultural divides and colonization. The ramifications of trying to force Western British ways on a different, still developing culture. The colonizers think they are helping, bringing the locals into modern times and civilization. But these people didn't ask for that help. Not to mention the judgments Ruth and even Clodagh seem to make upon the ways of the natives, automatically assuming their ways are superior. But what I talked about most in the 1947 review is the thing that hits me the hardest when it comes to this film, and that is control, or should I say the illusion of control, as these women deal with desires that they suppressed for so long. There's a saying normally associated with Alcoholics Anonymous: God grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, and the courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. And what that ultimately becomes is about control and Clodagh's inability to deal with things that she can't control. Even in her private life, when she couldn't control her fiancé, she ran away. All this is magnified by the palace at Mopu, which acts as some sort of id magnet. And you can either give into it completely like Mr. Dean, stifle it and let it build like Clodagh, or let it break you like Sister Ruth. And so perhaps the film arrives at some sort of hoped-for balance, acknowledging very human earthly desires like sex and wealth, but also accepting moderation in all these things. As if to say denying oneself is just as dangerous as the excesses. So guys, I've got a lot of different things, and you can pick your poison. What do you want to talk about out of any of those themes, or do you have your own?
You covered so many themes there.
It's such a deep film to me. Like, I feel like I'm always picking stuff out of this film that I felt like I just needed to because I could do a whole show on any one of these films, any one of these themes, I think. And so I just wanted to get them all out there and see where you guys wanted to go.
I feel like, there's a theme of like I don't know if this is actually a theme, but it's like all this effort is futile. Really,
No, that's fatalism. That's something that I would call fatalism.
because the movie definitely follows so many different characters, and there's so many different finishing points that each of them get to.
I think there's a Venn diagram in which there's overlap between your theme of fatalism and my theme of control, because the idea of fatalism is we don't have control. Things are predetermined for us. Like there's no way out. I talked about the illusion of control. There's nothing that Clodagh could have done to stay longer than she did. The fact that she stayed as long as she did, one person got transferred, another person died. She probably stayed too long. She has this one monologue where she says, like, I can't stop the sky from being so bright. You talked about the wind. I can't stop the wind from blowing. She was getting upset that she couldn't control these things. And that, to me, it is fatalism in the sense she cannot control her own fate. None of them could control it. As much as they wanted to control their emotions, this area forced them to give into it, which is why I talked about balance. Because, maybe the healthier road is balance of the heart and the head, just work-life balance. The fact that they were an order of workers. They make a big point of that. They worked all the time. And all that she was supposed to plant was things that were logical, things for food that they would eat. No flowers. You know what I mean? And that connected with something in her, that the loss of that joy. And so maybe if she was able to do some flowers and some plants, maybe if she had that balance, that might have been a healthy way to feed that element of ourselves, because we need pleasure as much as anything else. And the fact that they are suppressing themselves to this degree, puts them in a situation where they might break.
Well, the only other person, and I agree completely, but that brings me to and I'm going to say his title wrong, but I guess he was a shaman.
Holy man is what they call
Holy man. He, in essence, gave up everything and gave up all pleasure, and he's the only one still there, even in the rainy season, completely oblivious to what happens on this world, and he's thinking about something else, which is what the nuns want, but they feel like they're superior to these people. So,
well, because the nuns would argue that what is he doing to help others? He's just passively sitting there. That was, I think, at the root of their feeling of superiority. And you could argue that maybe he's broken, like Sister Ruth, just broken a different way. This isolationism that he's choosing. He used to be a general. Like he used to be a fighter, a warrior. And so he too had these issues of he could not control these inner impulses. So fate brought him to be the holy man.
Yeah, I was just thinking about the idea of like balance and pleasure, control, devotion. Part of why the general's son was one of my favorite characters is I think he falls sort of the most in the middle of these things. He has this handkerchief with the scent. He's like, isn't this wonderful? But he's like, I'd like to learn from these hours of the day to this hour. He's like, I would like to devote myself to this thing and experience something different, but I also need pleasure in my life. And then, he's like overcome with that other woman or whatever. But he's sort of going between the two and has the most balanced view.
Never able to do both at once. He was like, I need to focus on schoolwork, but man, look at this handkerchief. Or man, look at this woman. It also suggests an ultimate lack of control because he could not say no to he knew he was probably shouldn't have done what he did in terms of running off with her. He too lost control, thought he can control himself. And he couldn't, and he's very easily swayed by the finer things in life.
But he had the most human response to it, which was to 100%. Literally go to the nun and be like, I did this thing. He just was the most
relatable.
Yeah, he was the most relatable character.
Given his age, too, to some degree, potentially the most modern in terms of sensibilities. Patrick, anything on that?
I didn't like that. Man, his character felt a little strange to me. I was like, does he want to be a priest? Does he want to be a general? Does he want to be a scientist? I think
much like the general, he wanted modernization. There was. I think for the general and him, there is cachet in being recognized by the modern world. You want to be among the cool kids. It's that same mentality. It's like you grew up kind of a nerd and sort of an outcast. But if you did these certain things, if I learned about Jesus Christ, if I got nice things like perfume, they would accept me as one of the cool kids, in this case, one of the Brits, part of the Western world. So I think a lot of his motivation comes from a desire to connect to the Western world.
Yeah, he did have the funniest line in the movie. And I would like to study physics from the physical teacher. That was good.
Mel, any other themes or
I mean, like the theme of sickness came out to me. There's a lot of like illness, ailments,
physical and mental?
yeah, exactly. So I think that's very tied into the theme of control, even.
Absolutely.
And I really remember the garden nun when she shows her hands.
Yeah.
It was just like this really sort of biblical, like my hands shot. And there were there were just some moments like that.
I keep thinking about spirituality when I look at this movie because it's about what you have faith in. You know, you compare and contrast. Patrick already did a little bit, the holy man with the nuns. They are giving up their lives, in their heads anyway, to a higher being. Their interpretation, for some reason, the nuns can't respect the holy man, even though he's doing the same thing that they are doing. But he's doing it by giving up control. And they are trying to seize control in an area where they potentially have no right. We could talk forever about themes of this movie. Lots of different things to talk about this movie. We don't want to spend all day on it. Seems like we covered a lot of ground. You guys feel good?
Yes.
So it's time now for the Classic Movie Showdown. And this is where we put two classic movies that go head to head in an NCAA style bracket. We are in the 40s bracket tonight. And to read the rules for you, here is Patrick Taylor.
Okay, the rules for the Classic Movie Showdown. Number 1, seating criteria varies from bracket to bracket. Number 2, films at JB hosted screenings need to be 15 years or older. Number 3, voters are eligible if they see both films within a 12-month period. Number 4, voters must see both films in JB's presence, which is the hardest thing. Number 5, JB is ineligible to vote, but can break all ties.
Now, is my presence being the hardest thing because I'm so annoying to hang out with or so hard to get a hold of?
Oh, no, you're really hard to get a hold of, but not annoying to hang out with. It's just really hard to get a hold of, but let's stick with that.
That's the guy with the baby. It's only available for like an hour or two on a Saturday or Sunday. Mel has hosted many of these screenings before and attended many of these screenings, so she knows what we're dealing with here. But like I said, we are in the 40s bracket here. And so in this 40s bracket, Black Narcissus is a number 15 seed. And so therefore, we're doing our math. Patrick would go up against a number what?
Math.
15 goes up against a what in the first round?
I have never known. Never, and I probably will never.
15 goes up against the number 2 seed. All right, so Black Narcissus goes up against number 2 seed. How Green Was My Valley, a Best Picture winner from 1941 by director John Ford. We screened both those films in a month, and we had people vote on which film they preferred. Either of you guys, have you seen How Green Was My Valley before, or did you watch it for tonight's episode?
No, but I'm sexually aroused by that title. But how green is your valley? You know what I mean?
I'm honestly don't don't even want to acknowledge that comment. Maybe greener than I would like. I don't know. It is a Best Picture winner, and John Ford did win Best Director. He won back-to-back Best Directing Oscars. There was his second of 2 back-to-back out of his 4 total. He won the year before for Grapes of Wrath, which did not win Best Picture, and then won again second year in a row for How Green Was My Valley in 1941, which did win Best Picture, famously beating Citizen Kane for Best Picture. It's about a Welsh family, coal mining Welsh family. These guys didn't see it, so they're not going to vote. So we can go straight to what won at the vote that we had in 2017. And the winner was, sorry to say, How Green Was My Valley. The higher seed does move on. The people voting on it felt that How Green Was My Valley was boring, but less boring than Black Narcissus. And they also felt it was more family-oriented, and they appreciated that. Those were the main sticking points. I actually would have a lot of negative things to say about How Green Was My Valley if we did a show on that. As much as I love John Ford as a filmmaker, this is not one of his better efforts. In no way, in shape, or form, it should have beat Citizen Kane for Best Picture, from my point of view. It does move on in the 40s bracket, so Black Narcissus is eliminated from the 40s bracket. You guys haven't seen it. Do you have reactions based on this?
The fact that they thought it was boring, Black Narcissus, I don't think it was boring, you know? So I don't know what they were talking about, but maybe it's less boring than the Green Pastures movie, but I don't know. That's drink everybody.
90 seconds, and he doesn't remember the name of the movie already.
How green is your valley? Yeah.
There he did it. He remembered it.
Yeah, I also didn't think Black Narcissus was boring. So if that movie's less boring, then it must be quite interesting.
I'd be curious if you guys ever did watch it to see your reactions on it, because I actually find How Great Is My Valley to be boring. I actually would disagree. I think it's time to close things out, guys. Closing thoughts. Let's start with Mel. Anything you want to say before we go?
As usual, this discussion has deepened my appreciation for the movie. I think it's excellently well done, got under my skin, and I'm glad to have watched it.
So, Patrick, do you have any closing thoughts?
Yeah, I need a lot more chest hair.
No, you don't.
A lot.
Well, I'll let you borrow some of mine.
Oh God, no, I don't want your chest hair. I want his chest hair because his was like divine. It was like woo.
All right. Well, things did get a little awkward here. All right. So, trivia for our next classic. We're only going to get in one more show before moving on to our classics. We started late this year, so we have only one more set of episodes before the end of the season. So, our final classic of every season usually is a film celebrating its 75th anniversary. So, we're going to discuss on the next classic a foreign film which was released in the U.S. 75 years ago from this year, 2023. And it was the first film ever to top Sight and Sound's poll of the greatest films of all time. So we'll see if our panelists agree. Only 4 films have ever topped that list of Sight and Sound's greatest films of all time. Next up, however, this coming Monday night is our Sound Off, as Patrick is going to do his Below the Line segment. We're going to do a tweet beat in which we answer a lot of your questions related to the finales from last year, Mel's top 10 from 2022, the 1947 review, the Oscar preview, etc. That's coming up this upcoming Monday night. And with that, ladies and gentlemen, Mel and Patrick, say goodbye to the audience.
Bye.
All right. And with that, ladies and gentlemen, this meeting of the No Name Cinema Society is adjourned.